welcome to another fun Garden City Arts online program. Today is Minnie and me, and we are painting that cute little ladybug that you see that popped up in the left corner of your screen. My name is Katie Guthrie, and I'm going to walk you through this painting step by step and from start to end until you have a beautiful ladybug painting. Now, make sure you have the colors that are laid out on my foam plate in the order that you see. So we have white, we have light gray, we have light orange, red, and we have a black, okay? Make sure they're mixed and ready to go. You'll also want to have your canvas painted yellow and ready to, nice and dry and ready to be painted on. I would recommend getting a piece of chalk if you have it, or a pencil will work just fine. You can also have a cup of water, a paper towel, and for today we don't need a lot of brushes. We just need really two. One big wash brush that is nice and square and flat on the top, and one round brush, okay? If you have extra brushes, that's great. If you have a smaller shader brush, also flat on the top, that's wonderful too. If you have all of this stuff laid out and ready to go, then we can get started. All right, to get started with our painting, we're going to ignore our paint for now, and we are going to focus on drawing out our flower. Now, I used chalk to draw my flower. However, it's probably hard to see because it's white on yellow. So I'm going to grab a piece of paper, and I'm going to show you how to draw this really quick on this piece of paper. You're going to draw along on your canvas. So first things first, we are going to draw a nice big circle for the center of our flower. If you want, you can use the bottom edge of your, paint can or paint water to make a nice circle. Now remember, this is a sloppy copy. You're not drawing in permanent marker. You're drawing with chalk or pencil. So it's okay if you make a mistake. Now, once you have your center, we are going to draw nice big petals that come from the center and go out and off the edges. So I'm going to make a nice curvy line starting at the center and goes off because these are nice daisy petals. And I'm going to add another one. Now, I can start behind the flower and end to a point, just like that. I'm going to make another one. Do you notice how some of these flower petals are kind of overlapping? They're all going off my canvas, or almost all of them are going off my canvas. And sometimes they'll touch, but other times one petal goes behind another one. Okay, now you don't have to worry too much about that right now because we are still in the drawing and painting stage, but as we get further along, we'll need to be mindful of that. Okay, so you should have your flower drawn. Now we can get to the fun part, the painting. So going back to our paint and to our biggest brush, okay, so grab your big flat brush and go ahead and take your brush, dip it in the paint water, and then pat it dry. Your paintbrush should be nice and cool and damp to the touch, but it shouldn't be dripping wet, okay? Now, once you have that, you're gonna grab a little bit of white on the edge of your brush, okay? If you grab a big old glob of paint, that's gonna make problems for you later. So remember, when you're painting, you only need to grab a little bit on the top of your brush. Sometimes it's a good idea to dip your paintbrush in water and mix that water into the paint if your paint is nice and dry. If your paint is wet, then you're fine, okay? So you don't always have to do this. Next, I'm going to start at my center of my flower, and I'm going to do these big brush strokes going up and out. Now, if I use the broad side of my brush, it's going to make a big line. If I use the edge or top edge of my brush, it's going to make a thinner line. I want you to fill in those petals. I don't want you to do little tiny brush strokes. I want you to start at the center and go all the way out and up and away and off your canvas. If you want, you can wrap it around the edges. It's up to you. You don't have to do that. And remember, if your paint is dry, add some water into it. Also, if you go into the center of your flower, no big deal. We're gonna paint that orange in just a little bit, and it's okay if you get some white in there. So on my edges of my petals, I'm gonna use the top part of my paintbrush to make lines. In the inside of the petals, I can use the broad part of my brush to make a big, thick line and fill it in. I am allowing some of the yellow to pop through. So I'm only making it solid white on maybe one side of my petal. The rest of my petal, I'm intentionally, so I'm doing it on purpose, I'm intentionally leaving some of the yellow popping through, okay? So go ahead and fill in all of your petals, and then we'll move on. Look how fast and easy that was. It goes by like that. So once you are finished with your petals, you are ready to clean out your brush. So we swirl it in the paint water, we tap it on the side of the can, and then we pat it dry. Your brush should be nice and clean and ready to move on. Next, we are going to move to the center of our flower. Now, if you want, you can use your round brush for this, or you can keep using this big brush. But the very first thing we're going to do is create our outline of our center. So you are going to create a nice circle and a line where the center of your flower is going to end. Okay, now like I said, you can do that with this brush, but it's a little bit harder, especially if you haven't painted a lot. Sometimes it's easier to use that round brush. Once you have the center of your flower outlined, so that means I have a line around the outer edge of it, I can use my bigger brush and I can start on the edge and bring it in towards the center of the circle. And that keeps my line nice and clean and all of my orange where it's supposed to be, which is inside the center of our flower. Okay, so I am just about done with that. Once again, it's okay if you have a little bit of yellow showing through. Don't worry, that's not a bad thing. Once you are happy with the center of your flower, you can move on. But before you move on, swirl, tap, and dry your brush. Get it nice and clean. And then we will go to back to using, or maybe it's the first time you're using it, your round brush. Now, this brush is very good for making lines, and we're going to outline some of our petals. We're going to do that with this gray paint. So remember, if your paint is dry, dip your paintbrush in water and mix it into your paint. Mix that water into the paint right on the side of the pile of your paint. And that gives you nice and fluid paint that will move and glide on your canvas. Once you have that done, you can start making lines on the outer edge of your flower. Sometimes you need to add more water, like your teacher. I'm also going to put little tiny gray lines kind of at the base where the flower connects to the center. And these lines don't have to be perfect. Also, remember how we had some of our petals overlapping? I'm going to really draw attention to that by putting some of these lines and crisscrossing them into other petals. So this line is going to disappear behind that petal, and this line is going to go all the way down to the bottom, and then same thing's going to happen. I'm going to draw a line that disappears behind the petal. Do you see that? So they are overlapping. On this step, you kind of decide what overlaps and what doesn't. Now, if you want to, you can always go back in and add a little bit more white to some of your petals. If some of your petals are looking a little bit too dark, you want them brighter, no problem. You can use your big brush or your round brush, either or, to go back in and do another layer of white. All right, once you're done with that, the only other thing that you have to do left for this step is to very carefully outline in the gray the center of your circle. And when you're doing this, you can even go back in and do little tiny lines. Remember, this is your painting, so you can do really just about anything you want. I'm going to go back in and do little tiny lines. Just to give the center of my flower a little bit more texture. When you're finished, swirl, tap, and dry your brush, and we're ready to move on. Now, before we can move on to our ladybug, we have to make sure that our canvas is nice and dry. My paint is pretty thick in areas, especially where I did the petals and the center of my flower. So it's going to need time to dry. So I'm going to let my canvas dry for a little bit, and then I'll come back to it in just a moment. If you want, you can take a break, stretch your legs, go grab some juice or water, and then we'll come back in just a moment and start painting that ladybug. Okay, break. Okay, so now that we have a nice dry canvas, we're ready to put a ladybug on it. Now, your ladybug can go anywhere you want, and it can be as big or as small as you want. I am going to paint a ladybug similar to what's pictured in the top left-hand corner of your screen. So if you want, you can follow along, or you can kind of do your own thing. It's up to you. You could even do multiple ladybugs if you want. So very first thing we need to do is draw out a kind of an oval shape for our ladybug's body. Now I'm going to go pretty big, and it might be hard to see with this white chalk on white petals, but I'm just going to make a little bit of an outline for myself of my ladybug's body, and you can see mine's pretty big. That's okay. Yours can be pretty small or pretty big too. And very first thing I'm going to do is you can use your round brush to do the outline of your ladybug, or you can use your flat brush, whichever you want. But the very first thing I'm going to do is outline my ladybug's body. Remember, if your paint is dry, mix a little bit of water into it. And once I'm happy with my ladybug body, this is when I'm going to definitely use my biggest brush to fill in my circle. And feel free to speed up the video or slow it down whenever you'd like. Remember, you can always hit pause if I'm going too fast, or fast forward if I'm going too slow. Okay, I have a red ladybug. Now, I'm going to clean out my brush. So swirl, tap, and dry your brush. And then I'm going to start adding some details to my bug. If you want, you can pause your video and let the red dry, or you can do what I'm going to do, which is kind of work around the big red dot that isn't dry on our canvas. I'm going to put a little half circle that goes off of my ladybug's body. And I'm going to put little tiny feet. These little tiny feet, I'm going to show you what they're going to look like on here. We have, of course, our big ladybug body. We have our little ladybug head. And we will have antenna. I haven't drawn those yet. And then we will have little tiny feet. So I start with a diagonal line, and then I put another diagonal line kind of going in the opposite direction. And those are little bent legs. They are the little bit bent legs of my ladybug. Okay, so go ahead and draw those in with chalk or pencil. Make sure the legs are on a petal. They can't be just floating in midair. And then when you are ready, you can start painting the black. We won't do any details inside our red circle for now because mine is drying. Instead, we're going to do the black details kind of on the outside edges of our ladybug while we're waiting for the paint to dry. So, really fast, let's talk about how to make a line. When you are making lines, you can mix a little bit of water into your paint, and you want to control how much paint you have on your paintbrush, okay? If you have too much, like a big old glob, it's not gonna make a very nice line. So make sure you wipe off any extra paint, and once you have just a little bit, you are gonna press light as a feather. The lighter you press, the lighter and thinner the line will be. If you press hard, do you see how it bends over my whole brush? It's gonna make a really big chunky line. So light or heavy, those are your two options. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and paint on some little ladybug legs. I'm going to make these little ladybug legs a little thicker and heavier where they connect to the circle. There we go. And then once I have her legs or his legs done, I can move on to the semicircle head. Now, with my head, I didn't just do a semicircle. I kind of made it feel more natural by having a little bit more shape to it. So I made it a bit rounder at the bottom. And then fill in her head after you do the outline. So remember, you outline the shape first and then you fill it in. Okay, once you have the head done, we need to do the antenna. So remember, make sure you're controlling how much paint you have on your brush. Make sure you mix a little bit of water in, and make sure you press light as a feather when you're doing the antenna, because the antenna need to be really thin and light. If they're not, that's okay. Every ladybug's different. Okay, there we go. I have all of that finished. Now, the only other things left to do would be the detail inside our ladybug. Our ladybug is not just a red blob, right? Ladybugs have spots. So first I'm going to paint a little kind of hood. Let's say she's wearing a hoodie and her hood's down, kind of draping over the back. I'm gonna make a hood for my ladybug really fast. So I start by doing a curved line, kind of like a bowl. Then I cover up all of the red and I fill it in with black paint. Okay, now I'm going to do another curved line. It's going to start at the hood that we just did, and it's going to go all the way back to her bottom. Now once I have this line in, I can leave it just like that, or I can add a little bit more black on the end where her bottom is. And this is kind of where her wings open up. Her wings are black, but her wings are red, but her body is black. So basically what we're seeing is her little wings kind of splitting open. Then we just have to add the little dots. When you add the polka dots for the spots on her back, you want to think about maybe adding some variety to those spots. So they shouldn't all be the exact same size. Maybe have one be really big and then the rest be a little bit smaller. And they shouldn't all be in the same spot, right? These spots should spread out. Right, once you're happy with your spots, you're pretty much done with your ladybug. The only thing that you could do is add some details and some highlights. And this is an optional step, so you by no means have to do it. But if you want to add some more details and highlights to your ladybug, you can take the gray paint and you can go right along her head and highlight maybe just one little portion of her head. Maybe highlight a few of her spots so that they're not just plain black, but they have like these little light up areas inside them. They're glistening. Okay, I could do a few more little tiny details, little touch-ups. You might notice that some of my gray is popping through my red, so I might have to go back in and do another layer of red. That's okay, no stress. You can do all of those little touch-ups now that we have reached the end of our video. And we are done. So remember, this is your painting. If you want to do anything else to it, you can. You could add more ladybugs, you could add a butterfly, whatever you would like. Make sure you sign your work at some point when you're ready. And I hope you had a lot of fun. I will see you all again soon, I hope. Bye! Thank you for watching this Garden City Arts online program. Please help us thank our sponsors.